Hey everybody, Dr. Dane here, and I wanted to talk to you about testing for COVID-19 antibodies. And I sent out an email earlier this week, and in the email I said, 2 months ago, nobody knew what antibodies were, let alone how they worked and why they're important. But now with COVID-19, we are starting to understand the concept of what antibodies are, what herd immunity is, which I'll talk about just briefly, and why we chose to be tested. So Joe and I use a lab called KBMO Diagnostics, recommended by a really good friend and smart guy. There are a lot of antibody testing companies out there. We went with somebody who is going through the FDA process. That's a very reputable lab that is testing specifically for COVID-19 antibodies as opposed to all coronaviruses. So you want to know if you have the antibody specifically for this strain of virus. And the reason we chose to get tested is we wanted to know if we were in that category of people that were producing antibodies. Now, and this isn't just for COVID-19, when your body is exposed to any virus or what we call an antigen, it produces antibodies in response to that. Now, the first thing you have to understand is you have to have a certain amount of viral load, a certain amount of viral exposure to be able to kick on your immune system. And I explained this, but there's two types of antibodies. There's IgM and IgG. IgM, think of as the police force if a bank is getting robbed or your cell is getting robbed by a virus. You want to call in a crisis hotline or someone to come in and protect and get the crisis under control. That's your IgM antibody, and that's produced within 1 to 2 days of a viral load, a viral exposure. Okay, now the problem with COVID, unlike other flu years where we're exposed because we are not socially distancing, we're not wiping everything down, we're not wearing masks, a lot of us have not had a sufficient viral load to initiate this immune response. And eventually we want to initiate this response so that we can not only produce IgM, which is the initial response that you get within 1 to 2 days, but then we want to produce what's called IgG antibodies. And IgG antibodies are produced 7 to 10 days after an immune response is liberated to a particular virus. Once you start producing IgG antibodies to that specific virus, you have what we call herd immunity. You have more long-term immunity. Now, they don't know, with all the research out, they don't know, and because this virus is really new, they don't know if you can be reinfected once you start producing IgG. And the takeaway here is just because you have IgG antibodies doesn't mean that you can't be reinfected. Now, I personally think that it's better to have antibodies to a particular pathogen like this virus, because once your body recognizes that virus, it can initiate a response and wipe out the virus immediately as opposed to not having antibodies. Now, specifically what I think is extremely important, this is the test, I'll go over this in just a second. If you or a loved one has a comorbidity, okay, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, okay, if you're immunocompromised from chemotherapy or other immunosuppressive drugs that you may be taking, it's really important, I think, to have the test and know where you stand. Joe and I are very healthy, and we wanted to know where we stand. We both tested negative. What does that mean? Well, we're not producing IgM or IgG, so we haven't been significantly exposed to the virus, and we haven't produced an immune response that's going to protect us long term. So what does that mean? It means as we come out of our homes and stop socially distancing, we still need to be careful, and we don't have a comorbidity. But certainly, if you were a loved one of mine and you were tested negative, I would make sure that you were still socially distancing, wearing a mask, keeping things sanitized, maintaining social distance until you had enough of an immune response built up to this virus, or we had herd immunity where other people in the community have developed antibodies where now you can't be infected, okay? Now, let me just go over the test. The test kit is super simple, guys. It literally is a one-page requisite form, okay? And the requisite form, you need a physician's signature. So you would need my signature at the top. It's a one-page form. You fill this out. And then basically what you do, it's a finger prick test. And there's a finger prickers in here that you prick your finger with. And then there's a card. You put 5 blood droplets on the card. And then it goes back into this biohazard bag. It goes back into this package. And then it goes into a UPS overnight package with a self-addressed label. Super simple. Took us literally about 10 minutes to do the whole thing. Literally 2 days later, I got the results back that we were negative. Now, most of the people that I've been testing are testing negative, which again, I don't think is a good thing because we need about 40 to 70% of the population to have herd immunity where we're all protected. I have had one person so far have a positive IgG and a negative IgM. What does that mean? It means that they were exposed at one time. This one individual had gotten sick a couple months ago and then got over it and started producing IgG. So if you're IgM negative, IgG positive, it means you've been exposed at some point, but now you have protection because you're producing antibodies. If you're IgM positive and IgG negative, you're in an active phase of the virus and you may or may not have symptoms, but you're actively being infected by the virus and eventually you'll have IgG antibodies. If you're negative to both, it means you haven't had sufficient exposure. And if you're positive to both, it means that you're actively within probably a week or 10 days of the actual exposure to the virus. So again, it's a personal decision. I think it's one that's worth doing. Personally myself, we've tested our family. I've tested both my mother and my mother-in-law because I want them to know if they're gonna go out in the public, do they need to continue to really stay safe? Okay, so that's antibodies in a nutshell. If you're interested in testing, please reach out to our office, 215-968-1661. We can order you a test kit. The test is $199 and you'll have a response within a couple days. So hope this is helpful, guys. And I implore everybody to continue to stay safe. Hopefully we're reopening Pennsylvania and reopening businesses. I know the weather's getting great and all of us are looking forward to getting outside and enjoying our life again. So everybody take care and we'll talk to you soon.